Matthysse versus Ruslan Provodnkiov. Understandably, this is a fight that fans are really keen to see. This is a fight that's got war written all over it. This is a fight that's got Fight of the Year candidate written all over it. I hate to put a dampener on things. From my perspective, whilst there is a time and a place for these fights, it's not my favourite type of boxing to watch. I don't want to be too purist, too sort of boringly hardcore about things. But for me, when you've got guys who don't understand the meaning of head movement, guys who don't understand the meaning of a jab, guys who don't understand the meaning of boxing on the back foot, there's a limit to how interested I am. These two guys represent the top of the 140-pound division. Yet, if you look at some of the performances, Devon Alexander fight for Matthysse, Zab Judah, let's talk, Chris Algieri for Provodnkiov, Tim Bradley. There are other examples as well. These guys can both be outboxed. The Chris Algieri Provodnkiov fight was a fight that I scored a draw, but effectively Provodnkiov was outsmarted by a guy who could move and by a guy who could show some sort of punch variety. The Devon Alexander, the Zab Judah fights for Matthysse. I know both of those fights are controversial, but let's say, you're dropping a decision to Devon Alexander in a close fight. Devon Alexander isn't the top of the sport, is he, realistically? My point is that these are guys who can be outboxed by thinking fighters, by guys with defence, by guys with movement. And whilst this is a fight that stylistically may catch light and may be a very entertaining spectacle, for me, it doesn't represent the top of the sport or the top of the 140-pound division. I know it's controversial. I'd honestly pick Adrian Broner over both of these guys. After the performance last week, I'd probably lean towards Lamont Peterson over both of these guys. Mauricio Herrera, I know he's already been involved, obviously, but he is someone you'd consider against these guys now. For me, they're too easy to outwork. They're too imminently flawed, too obviously beatable, so lacking in some of the basics. And funnily, their biggest strengths are also their biggest weaknesses. The fact that they're so one-dimensional in their assault and so lacking in sort of fundamentals. So it's a fight, the winner of the fight is clearly relevant. The winner of the fight is in line to get some very, very big fights. And based on how highly these two guys are both rated, I suppose you'd have to consider both top 5 at 140. Realistically, you'd be considering the winner of this fight to be the number 2, number 3 in the division, I presume. But for me, both of them are sitting ducks for a boxer to come and take them to school, effectively. I haven't looked at the odds at all. I would imagine Matthysse is the favourite here. Matthysse has got a substantially higher KO ratio. He's got more experience. To be fair, both have been involved in pretty big fights, but Matthysse had some really, really big fights. He's known as this crazy puncher. I think both guys have 3 losses off the top of my head, although I haven't checked, so I'd need to look that up. But I think both guys have had 3 losses, and I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying none of them have ever been stopped. So you're talking about 2 big punchers who come to fight, who both come forward, who throw power punches, who fight at close range, who don't get stopped. It's an intriguing contest in that sense, I grant it. And as I say, I imagine Matthysse is favourite. But for me, I'm slightly inclined to go Provodnkiov here. And this isn't a strong pick or prediction here. I'm slightly... I don't really have any confidence in either way, and neither result would surprise me. But, gun to my head, pick a fighter, I'm probably picking Provodnkiov, and I'll tell you why. We've talked that both guys can be beaten by a really sort of slick, technical operator, boxer. I've given examples for both fighters, like Devon Alexander, Chris Algieri. Not that those guys are like slick as hell, not that those guys are like elite boxers, I mean, neither of these, I don't think either. Anyway, I won't get sidetracked. We've already discussed how both these guys are vulnerable to that kind of operator. The difficulty is, for me, Lucas Matthysse has showed that he can also be vulnerable to a guy who stands at close range or mid-range and fights in the same way he does. Let's talk the John Molina fight. Yeah, a potential fight of the year candidate. But Molina is a bang average operator. I mean, you saw what Adrian Broner did to him recently. Humiliated him. Embarrassed him. Taught him a lesson. It was domination. Yet Molina went 11 rounds with Matthysse. I think he dropped Matthysse twice from short hooks. My point is not only is Matthysse vulnerable to a boxer, he can also be hurt. I know he's never been stopped, but he got dropped twice by Molina, by someone who went to war with him. Although it was a close fight, I don't think there's many people who disagree with the Matthysse-Danny Garcia fight result, that Garcia won. Garcia is not a guy who favours the sort of slick jab and move approach. He's another come forward guy who lacks different dimensions to his game. He's a mid-range hooker, as Dwyer says. Again, he dropped Matthysse. Again, he was effective fighting without that sort of amateur technical style boxing. My point is, whilst Matthysse possibly is a harder puncher than Provodnkiov, Matthysse has been dropped by guys who are brawlers like Molina or mid-range hookers like Garcia. Now, whilst Provodnkiov may not be as big a puncher as Matthysse, I would argue that he probably is as big a puncher as Molina and Garcia. Maybe even more so. So if those guys are dropping Matthysse, I think there's scope that Provodnkiov drops him. And if those guys are having success fighting with their styles against Matthysse, I think there's scope that Provodnkiov's style will have success against Matthysse. Now, on the other side, Provodnkiov, yes, he can be outboxed. Yes, he can be Chris Algieri. We know that. But he's a guy who doesn't give me any concerns whatsoever about his chin. I haven't followed Provodnkiov since the start of his career. Off the top of my head, I don't recall him being dropped in a fight recently. Certainly not how, John Molina dropped Matthysse recently. Provodnkiov has success when the fight is on the inside, when the fight is a war. I mean, Timothy Bradley, who's a pound-for-pound level fighter, Provodnkiov took him very close by being able to jag it into a dogfight. My point is, Provodnikov's got limitations like Matthysse, but I've got more concerns about Matthyisse's durability. And even though Matthysse is a very, very big puncher, I actually think there's a higher chance that Provodnkov hurts Matthysse than the other way around. And I think Matthysse is possibly more vulnerable and has a few more miles on the clock. I'm not aware of Provodnkiov losing a fight or being dropped by someone who fights in a similar style to him. That's to say, someone who fights at mid-range, close range. Whereas I am aware of Matthysse being dropped and beaten by guys like John Molina, Danny Garcia. It's interesting. I hope this fight sets fire like fans expect it to. I hope it is a fight of the year contestant. Realistically, I struggle to rate it as highly as some people do, on the basis that both of these guys are so obviously beatable. Again, it's not a strong pick, but if I had to pick one or the other, at this stage I'm leaning Provodnkiov, but I accept Matthysse probably is the favourite. Let me know your thoughts. I'm keen to discuss.